All right. Hey, it's Monday. Good Monday. We're going to do some fun stuff today. I like to think this is going to be fun. This is maybe, I think it might be the first of something I'm going to start doing more often, and that is looking at an artist and their work. And starting with Wally Wood, and I'll give you a little brief description on who Wallace Wood is in a second, is a good idea, because Wally Wood has a document, that there's a document out there about Wally Wood called 22 Panels. Wally Wood's 22 Panels that always work, it's called. So we'll be looking at that, and then looking at that through his work. Okay, so we're going to get to that in a second. Now, so today's page is from a suggestion from our good friend Tim Rins. Hiya, Tim. And so the suggestion is, hold on, there it is. I have to find the book. Train Robbery, Old-Fashioned Style. It's a fun one. What's an old-fashioned style? You hear about train robberies going up to the 40s, 50s, right? 1960s, maybe. But the majority of train robberies you would hear about in literature would be, during the 1880s or so, when cowboys or desperados would rob trains of their, the stage or the coach that has the big safe in it, and they gotta blow up the side of it and try to blow it open, the whole deal. Anyways, so I thought I'd put the two together and play with it like I'm writing a script for a story. Sorry, I have been trying to keep a sneeze from coming out for the last couple of seconds. So that's today's page. I drew that in pen, pencil, ink. Or I'm sorry, watercolor. It was watercolor I used. Black watercolor and white jelly roll pen. So that's and a couple of markers, just a gray marker and a black marker. So that's what I did today's page with, and it was a bit of fun. What I did was I scanned it, and then I sorted out the panels and the panel layout, and then I, in two parts, one part with the cowboy at the bottom and one part with the closed panels, I converted those to black line art. And so then I overlaid the cowboy and erased out the other panels from behind him. So, and then I merged all that into one level. So the final art is all one uniform range of grays and blacks, as opposed to, inks will come in warm and cool values. So some inks tend to have a kind of a blue tone to them, and other inks tend to have a kind of a red tone, cool, warm. Anyways, so that's today's page. So thank you very much, Tim, for the suggestion. I also put up a notification for those that are in the region that the London Comic Jam is on tonight, on 6 o'clock. We'll be getting together and at TAP, the Arts Center down in Dundas Street here in London. So if you're kicking around, come on down. We're going to be doing some making some comic pages together. So the other thing to show you is this. So on Friday, I went through the elements and the principles on a big sheet of paper, and I combined the two things together. So line incorporating balance, movement, contrast, pattern, rhythm, emphasis, and unity. Shape, same things. Color, same things. Value, same things. And so by sitting down and working through these two different things that we've talked about recently, about the elements in art, or the elements in design and the principles of art. Why those two defined so, I've never really been sure, but art and design, same kind of thing, man. Anyway, so this is a fun project that I discovered somewhere. I can't remember where, some time ago. So I thought I would take a go at this. So you can see that in the video I did on Friday. Now, on Friday, I left pattern, rhythm, and unity undone. And the reason that I did that is that by doing these 4, and I don't know why I went to emphasis, and left the ones around it blank instead of just doing 1/2 of them. But the reason that I left 3 of the rows undone was that anybody that's watching that video that sort of sees the example of how these things work, it gives them the opportunity to really think it through and the decisions that they make to represent these things. And so I also put down what the definition of each thing was up above and along the side. And I put little handy dandy, markers for what is in each row. So yeah, so I feel like that went pretty well. Now, today. This is today. So I've got a better copy of it here to show you. Now, this is this big old copy I have had kicking around for I don't know how long. And it's on, it's an 11 by 14 sheet of paper, which has to say something about, because you don't necessarily print stuff on this size, really, So, and I've added all kinds of notes from different books I've had, that different books that I've read about Wally Wood's work, and tried to encapsulate all the little things that are pertaining to this on the page. How this came about. So what this is Larry Hama worked for Wally Wood as a letterer, and then as a scripter and a story writer on one or so projects they were working on. 69 to 74. And so, I mean, working in a studio with Wally Wood, you would be exposed to all of Wally's shortcuts, and you would be exposed to all of the mechanisms in place that artist writer utilized in order to get projects done. Okay, so here is now a little bit about Wally Wood. Wally Wood was an EC Comics artist. Okay, entertaining comic. Now, EC Comics was the company that was taken out by the Comics Code in the 1950s, 60s, I think it was. And so, born in 27, so he lived 54 years and passed away. He was he would really overwork himself, really overstress himself, but he came onto an industry in the 1920s, and he just sort of just cooked, and then he gets into his Marvel years. This is where a lot of people initially recognize Wally's work. And so one of those things is right here, 1960s. I'll show you something you might not... these are the sort of things that people take for granted. So, best times, worst times. Here he is, drawing the Mars Attacks cards. Here, so all you people that remember Mars Attacks cards, there you go. There's some Wally Wood there. And the flying things, little projects, and all this sort of crazy, ugly stickers, and then he gets in. I got to be careful which pages I open up to, because here we go. This is where I'm going. There he is. That's Daredevil. So that's Wally Wood. That's Wally Wood's contribution to Marvel, is Daredevil. So fantastic that this is an ongoing thing in the world today. So even though a lot of these projects like EC Comics and things like that came to an end at a certain period of time, they keep making Daredevil books, and they keep producing those. And so, thank you, thank you very much to Wally Wood for creating that character. So that was the high point. And then, but he always had a problem with being overworked and feeling disconnected and having his own addictions. And unfortunately, his life ended at an age frighteningly similar to my own. So it's something to consider, Don't overdo it, Chris. So this is what Larry Hama, when he was working for him in his studio, he started collecting up these little examples that Wally Wood would have kicking around. Now, interesting things about Wally Wood. On the studio wall, he had this. And this is what was on the wall. Never draw anything you can copy. Never copy anything you can trace. Never trace anything you can cut out and paste up. Now, for him, it was all about efficiency of time, and it was all about getting the project done and telling the story as best as one can. So he would do things like clipping cars out of newspaper print publications, because those cars were already reduced down to halftones. And so he would just cut those out and paste them up into a composition, because they're already zippotoned. They're already halftoned, and halftone is the gray Ben-Day dots, or you know what I mean. The gradation of black through white. So he would utilize those, and he would source reference a lot of times, and you can tell very clearly that some of the faces that he did are recognizable characters, recognizable people. But he would also photostat his own images and just through the pages as required. All of these things that some people go, that's cheating, you should just draw. He's creating art. But the thing about it is he's storytelling. But never draw what you can swipe. He said swipe. A lot of times it's rephrased as copy. So he could very well have said copy. But never draw what you can swipe, never swipe what you can trace, never trace what you can photocopy, would be the way we interpret it today, and never photocopy what you can clip out and paste down, or cut out and paste down. So, so that's a Wally Wood phrase. Another one would be, he said to Larry Hama one time, if he was taking too long inking a project or lettering a project, he'd say, he'd come over and he'd say, well, is it art yet? Which gives you a sensibility about practical application to storytelling, as opposed to this grandiose vision of this artistry as enterprise. So Larry Hama gathered up all these examples of shortcuts, or as he'd call them, lazy layout. Wally Wood would call them lazy layouts. And then the expression that he made was some interesting ways to get variety into those boring panels where some writer has a bunch of lame characters sitting around and talking for page after page. And so it's, he wanted to keep the narrative flowing. Okay, so so Larry Hama put these together on a sheet, and then he would photostat these out so he went over to become an editor at Marvel after working for Wally Wood. Larry Hama, in case you don't know, G.I. Joe, and brilliant contribution to a larger industry was Larry Hama's work on G.I. Joe. So, so here's a guy who went and found all these examples, would photocopy this out and hand it to artists while he was an editor at Marvel to sort of say, here's some pointers, here's some tips, take a look at these things. So if you're ever stuck for a spot about what to put into a page, to continue the narrative and keep things moving along, or keep interesting panel change-ups, look at this. And so if you ever get a chance, ask Larry Hama about some of these things. He's still doing convention tours and stuff like that. But what I did is I went through. So Larry Hama's the one that you can always find is just the panels, and so what I found was one that breaks down what each panel represents, and I put those notes on my page. So what I thought we might do is take a look at this, and now I'm going to make notes that apply to this. I will write things down that represent some of these panels on paper, and then I'll put this with all the other stuff that I'm going to be putting on my Patreon for people that are interested in the process of storytelling. So, but what I thought might be helpful was to take some of his cited examples, okay, and look for them in his own work. And so we're going to try that for a few minutes. So our first one of the 20. Oh, and by the way, 22 panels isn't correct. It's 24. It's called 22 panels that always work. But there's, 22-ish because it's actually 24 panels that are collected together. So I thought we'd look at some of his EC comics and see what things can be found, because I'm pretty sure you're going to see an awful lot of the stuff that's in here. But maybe we'll start right at the beginning. And so his first one that he says is Big Head. The entire focus on the emotion, on the character's face. There's no backgrounds. Just meat potatoes. Get the guy's face in the panel, and that's all you need to be focused on. Don't worry about anything else. So I was going through this earlier on, and I was finding different things, and it really helped me out to do that, because once I was home this morning, I was sitting here and thinking, did he actually put this to task? And the truth is, he did. So, Big Head, entire focus on emotions on a character's face with no background. Now, here's one example of that. Right here, right? And it would be so simple for my brother to stab me with a knife, is the whole dialogue. But look at the intensity and the emotion there. All right? Look at the concern and the fear that he has about his life. And it's exactly what Wood talks about. The focus on the emotion on the character's face. And so he can concentrate on that right here. It's a fantastic skill to be able to draw characters with really strong facial expression. There's a really great artist whose skill at that is, I think, pretty intriguing, and that would be Kevin McGuire is his name, and he's done a number of different projects over the years. He's Justice League work that he did in the late 80s, 90s, I think, phenomenal. And everybody looks like, as there's listen you, and depending on where that consonant is that starts that paragraph, their mouth shape is the shape of your mouth shape when you make that L shape. U, the Y shape. So he was really good for catching not just the mouth shapes for expression, but also the emotional expression on a character's face. So if somebody's upset, like you, and they're crying, it looks like a person's crying while saying those words. So yeah, Kevin McGuire is a really good example of that. I mean, Wood was really great too, but I'm telling you, it's a real different level of thing when you're that highly focused on something. So we've got at least one example there already, and let's see if we can just flip through and find another one quick. See, he does a lot of these where he has a picture of the guy and the subject. But, well, here, how about this? All children born on this planet colony will be professionally cared for by trained psychiatrists for the first 7 years of their life. Come back in 5 years. My baby. That's nothing but this cutout around this lady here. That's nothing but her emotional response to the situation at hand. Now, these are two separate panels, or you can look at this as our next example, which is the two talking heads, but we'll get to that in a second, because it's not quite, one person needs to be facing the other really for the talking heads. So let's see if we can find one more, which I think should be pretty. Oh, there you go. Here's just your guy, nothing but his face. Happy. Or even dreaming the same stuff. Happy face. So it's all about just the character's emotional insight. It's about that moment of us being able to truly understand the how the person's feeling in and of that very moment in the story. Now, our next one is readers get a sense of perspective of both characters, and so it's called the back of the head and the part of the head. So this person is facing us. This person's head is back to us. And that is a kind of a common trope. Now, when he was doing EC, I find that a lot of his panels has both people with what's called a stage framing, where they're both like sort of three corners or three-quarter pose with their one shoulder forward, their other shoulder back. And they're talking to each other, but they're not necessarily facing each other specifically. But they're sort of standing there on a stage. What do you think of that, Bob? I think that's a terrible idea, you know. But here's one example right here. There's nothing to talk about, darling. You know, so here's this couple speaking. We've got the back of his head. I can't help it, Elaine. I just can't. It's in my blood, right? And then we've got Elaine, who's talking to her husband. And so there you go. You've got both perspectives of the characters in the same panel. You've got her upset. You see a little single tear, you know, on her cheek. And he has this sort of resolute, you know, I can't help it, Elaine. I always picture people in the 50s with a cigar. And then here's something really crazy, okay? Next page, same thing. He does the same thing directly across the pages in the book. And so if you literally just turn to the next page, it's the opposite panel. If these pages are facing each other, you're literally looking at the same pose, the same characters, the same panel. I don't know that you'd see that happen often, but it's really funny to find one. You know, this down below is technically the same thing, but you've got it kind of doubled over. You've got the mom is silhouetted out, the dad's largely silhouetted out, and there's little Jimmy, right? And yet you've got his perspective. I'll miss you terribly, honey. And you know, they say I have no daddy. You know, like there's the little boy's response, and then there's the mother's trying to reinforce her son and assure him. Well, now you can tell him otherwise. You know, he's done it with three characters in that panel. But I can think of no greater sampling of this than that. So now L shape and silhouette. Wooden silhouettes are really interesting, and I'll show you. Let's see, I had a really good example a second ago. So here is some really interesting. Now we talked about L-shape compositional with compositions recently. We talked about utilizing L-shape in panel, and you know, he's applied an L-shape, but with a silhouetted character in the background. So if you want to take leaps and bounds, you could recognize these repetitive patterns that are within here. There's these direct L's that are moving throughout this part of the composition. I thought this was interesting. It's not specifically the example though. A really good one for that, and I came across it earlier. I just spent about 10 minutes before I started the stream just thinking perchance like what would be the possibility of easily finding all of these laid out ideas, and I was just completely blown away with the fact that it was far easier than I thought it would be. L shape, maybe I'll come back to it in a second when I run across it with doing something else. So clearly it's the one that he's not using directly. And what I mean by directly is like a really clear she or he is in a silhouette in the background with something forming an L shape in the foreground. But he does a bunch of different other examples. It's just that silhouette part that it's not as clear. Oh, there we go. Here's one. Right there. This is an L shape with a silhouette. You've got this repetitive L patterns in the darkness. And even though it's not fully a silhouette, what he's showing is an explosion. This is a story about Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And so when the bomb goes off, it hyper illuminates everything. But it creates all of this interesting shape language and has these characters reduced down to, you know, very, very basic line art. Very basic shapes, and really sells it Really sells it home by doing that. So, yeah, not as... Oh, there's another one. There you go. There's a pretty direct one. There's a pretty solid L shape. It's, there's your character right there. In that L shape silhouette. Okay? Hiya, Joshua. How you doing? So just flipping around through this very book about his EC Comics alone, you can already start to see all these really clear examples of how he does stuff, and then how he enhances those a little bit by having, interesting ways, different ways of interpreting this. Like the frame, okay? Frame within a frame is what this largely is. It's the L-shaped silhouette, by the way. It's a ground floor cast in L-shape with characters in a shadow. It adds emotion for the character. So now the frame within a frame is pretty straightforward, but he uses it a lot, and he uses it in different ways. Now you look at this and you see it in a rectangular way with all these smaller rectangles that denote the paneling of a multi-paned window, and you're looking at your character inside there. But another way he would do that is this, where we have in his science fiction stories, he'd have these characters arranged around a view screen, and then we're looking at what's happening in the, through the telephoto lens, or what they're looking at down on Earth, but he does this a lot. He has this in all kinds of things. Josh says it's a classic cheat sheet with great compositional tips. Oh, you betcha. Here's another frame within a frame. Right here, literally on the opposite side of the page. You've got one here where, look, George, the light in the sky, it's moving. And she's looking out the window and there's a spaceship flying by. And then we go down below. They're after me, Sarah. They're after me because I'm right. I love the writing in the 1950s. I'm sorry. And there's a spaceship and you've got somebody disembarking off it. You can also look at this in the same sense as L-shape with silhouette, if you really want to get technical. But this is actually, within this frame within a frame example, this is something that's down here. It's called downcast, or down shot with cast shadows. So we're looking down towards the spacecraft, and there's these shadows being projected from an illuminating source, which is inside the spaceship. But we'll get to that one in a minute. So the frame within a frame stuff is pretty solid. Now, this version here, the white Vendée, the black gutters, there's the silhouette factor here for the characters, and the illuminated part is actually the window. You could technically suggest that that's what this is, and that, it's really just a reversal where your illumination source is either on the images that are in the foreground or the images that are in the background. So in this case, they're in the background. Outside's more lit up than inside, but they're not silhouettes, right? And in this case, the illumination is far more on the interior than it is on the outside. And it just helps to separate those two planes. And let's see if we can find one more example of the window within a window, or the panel within a panel, the frame within a frame. Well, technically, that's one. You've got the two of them standing inside their house in front of the windows, and here's the panes of the window, and you can look through and see the Mars with trees on the other side of the window. Technically, that's a frame within a frame, just not as directly, right? Oh, there you go. Here's a prime example. Right there. Open the gates, Doctor. We want our children. Wait! Nothing worse than the way I dramatize these things, and I'm sorry for that. Same page, you've got one directly below. We won't wait. We want our children. He's literally flipped the perspective that we've gone from behind the fence, looking at the mob moving towards the Doctor here, and then we flip the frame, or we flip the camera to be over the shoulder as though we're one of the mob looking directly at the Doctor and one of the other characters in behind. Same page. Here we go. Does it again. He's now got the Doctor addressing the mob with the fella behind it. It's just a different perspective. Joshua says, Chris, you're the best bowling announcer in the universe. Why, thank you. Boy, when I was young, I used to dream of somebody saying that to me one day. Okay, so here is a great example again of this sort of pushback where you're pushing the two frames against each other. He does this in a couple of different ways. He calls dark foreground, light background, light foreground, dark background. And there's one of each side by side. So not half bad. So here's another example of white Ben-Day and silhouette, but he does it. It's not like he's looking through a frame, like a window. We've got the back of the characters as he's looking. The compositional elements that he wants you to focus on is this movement of this spaceship going across the panel. And the fact that we're standing here with this high contrast image where we're standing behind these characters that are shadowed, it just sort of draws your focus more specifically to the spaceship. And in case that didn't come across clearly enough, look where his finger's pointing. Look at the spaceship. So, hi Susanna, welcome aboard. So there's another great example of that utilization. So what I've traced over here in black pen just to enhance is what I was talking about here, the flip side. Okay, so I just didn't pencil it back. Some of the 22 panels, and they're called 22 panels because this is so lightly penciled in you can't see it, and this is so lightly penciled in that I had to go over it in ink just to see what it was. He describes this one, Ben-Day panel, leaving the room, wallpaper, and drapes and brick. All kinds of detailed images are within the room that you focus on while the characters are leaving it. I had to look that up to see what that specifically meant. So you're understanding the context of the space as the character is departing from it. So it's almost like a camera shot, like in a television show, where you're okay, it's a crime scene, and we're in the crime scene, and you can see there's terrible business that's up on the walls and around the room, and you've got somebody who comes in the doorway and goes, "Oh my goodness," and departs. But it leaves, so you've got that emotional resonance of the character, but it leaves you with the impact of the why, which is the details in the room. In this case, he's talking about wallpaper, drapes, the brick, like he's just setting the scene. I gave you an extreme example. Okay, so there's that. Now, open panel, complete object, like of a car or something like that within the plane. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of this. Now, this is an example that doesn't quite fit. And the reason that I say it doesn't quite fit is that he contextualizes the object within a scene. This, by the way, would be an example of the paste-up thing I told you about earlier. He contextualizes it within the scene as opposed to it just being the car. So, but I still say it applies. It's just, rather than only being the car, like he'll do it a lot where he'll have a rocket ship and the whole panel image is just the rocket ship. It's a floating open panel with a rocket ship bursting diagonally across the plane of what would be your frame of reference. I'll just see if I can find one in here, because I'm literally just utilizing some of his EC work for our examples. So, well, I have an example here, but just give me a second and we'll get to this. But this is a great example of downshot cast shadow as well. So, yeah, we don't have one with just specifically the car or the missile or the spaceship or whatever, I don't think. But because we're only working from a limited amount of stuff, but I'm sure that if you go through enough of his work, you'll find a really direct example of that. You know, just the rocket ship moving through the space, right? So that would be an example of the open panel, complete object car. That's the entire thing. That's the entire thing that you're looking at. So in this case, it's a rocket ship shooting up the side. Now, so, that's 8. That's our first 8 that we've gone through now. Now, downshot cast shadow, I referenced in a second ago. Oh, my corner of my page is turned up. I hate that. Okay. All right. So, downshot cast shadow is right here. Okay. Downshot cast shadow, it adds drama. You can do like extreme close-ups or reactionary emotion. All these things that, like, including the extreme close-up, these are all, again, adding emotion to a scenario. Downshot cast shadow is something like this. We're looking down at this character, and getting a sense of where a light source is. Even though we don't have this defined frame of reference around him, we don't have all this additional information that really isn't required. We want to focus on this guy. That's it. Another way to do that would be framed, and so directly beside that, just like it's directly beside here, there's another example of downshot cast shadows in a contextual scene. So we've done this. We understand where he might be. Only by a rough spot he suddenly discovered on the alloy pavement. Dun dun dun. So there's an example of there's both examples side by side on the same page. So it's kind of funny to find that. I mean, here's another one here that's within a frame of reference, right? Here's a fantastic example of a 3-stage. Now, a 3-stage is where we talk about 3 different sort of planes of reference, like 3 different specific planes: your foreground, your midground, your background. And this place is used by the Army for target practice. Cut it out. Okay, let's forget about it. So here's these 2 characters, and we're looking from their perspective as they're standing here in this rock promontory here. He's directly in the light. He's in the same shadowed area that projects off the back of this rock, which tells us that he's standing a little farther ahead than that guy is. And then here's the space that they're looking out over. In the middle ground, we've got these burn marks from where rockets were blown up, and then there's just the hills in behind. So this is a 3-plane 3-stage panel that sort of takes us through this greater sense of depth than we might have had, if it just had everything as a flat uniform value and you didn't really engage with this shadow work on the back of this. But even having the 2 guys one before the other, you're adding that additional plane in there. Here's another good example of that. The silhouetted characters that are in the middle ground separate for us the entirety of the image. This also follows into depth, and he talks about depth here. It's a realistic layout, or like can be used as an intro shot of the context of the scene or the architecture. So this depth shot, these contrast shots, these 3-stage shots, all of these different things are all 3 of these are serving to give you a much bigger understanding and a much more realistic sense of what the characters are doing, within wherever the place is that they are. Now, the contrast thing he uses a lot, but putting these characters in the shadow right here. Now, you've got all these other characters behind, okay? This big audience of women, and there's architectural elements behind them and the scenery behind them. And then we've got the 3 characters talking in this middle ground, and some interesting details with this fountainhead here, pouring water down into this water, or down into the lower part of this panel. Now, that also encapsulates this aspect of a panel layout, and that's the reflection, where you have your character standing there and a reflection of them down below. That is a different perspective. So he's incorporated that into the same panel, right? Reflection ones might be a little more tricky to find. It sort of has to suit the story, right? Let's see if we can find some more, though. So this is a time period in comics where you had an awful lot of, oh, Bob, oh, Martha, you know, yo, 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 Wally, what's up? So here's another reflection. Here's the water, the bath filled with clear, hot water. And so as we've got the bathtub filling, it gives you a sense of depth for the water by having the spirals or the circles along the top as the water's moving around. He's got that zipatone in there in order to sort of give you a deeper sense by adding that additional element to it. And all of these shortcuts that Wally Wood talks about, he examples in his own work. There's another reflection incorporated in. Now, largely the intention of the reflection panel is to have a character sort of standing there. It's a deeper resonance thing. They're actually reflecting on the story itself, the scene that they're in, the thing that's happening. And then you see the reverse image of them in the panel. So it's almost like they're evaluating themselves, and a little bit of dialogue up above their head of, oh, Bob, what have you done now? You know, whatever they're going to say. But he uses reflections in general a fair amount. Here's a rocket ship landed on this piece of rock. Here's a lake right here, big giant pile of stone sticking out of it. But there's the cast reflection of the stone in the water, just to give you a more clear understanding of this as water. You know, so not the same thing as the intention of the reflection panel, but he uses reflections in general a fair amount. You know, it's a good tool. There's this character's legs reflected in the water down below them. Some of these details about the rocket ship are reflected in the water down below. This guy's silhouette here. So you can see how all these different things he incorporates in his panels. But unless you kind of understood what to look for, you might not necessarily pick up on a lot of these things. Let's do one big object. One big object. One big object is where something is held right in the foreground, and then the response to it. So, you know, laser pistol, oncoming car, but it's an object. Alex Toth, I can think of a couple of examples with Alex Toth where he would utilize like the landing gear of a plane, and then there's a character standing with his arms on his hips looking at, boy, it's going to take us hours to fix that. You know, you would see examples like that through Alex Toth as well. To be honest, you would see examples of a lot of this, these sort of motifs being utilized by the same time frame of artists. The only reason I'm sticking to the Wally Wood examples is because it's his list, you know, or it's his the sampling that Larry Hamos put together of these 22 panels. Wally always thought would work, so I thought we might get a shot of a hunter holding up a gun. Yeah, it's tricky, eh? There you go. There's one. We found one. So there it is. It's the one big object. What in tarnation is that? A cheese box on a raft? Stand by the fire. There's the big gun. There's the portcullis. There's the hole they're going to fire this big gun through. And so, you know, here's the object. Here's the scene around it. But we're looking at it literally down the barrel of this gun, or, you know, with this object as being utilized for a sense of intensity, a sense of emotion, because what this thing is pointing at is what we're gun is just gun. or in this case, cannon. But it's pointed at this submarine. So our intention is to say, there in the panel is that this boat is going to shoot that one, and it does it a couple more times. This is a reverse angle of that, where we see all the guys within the ship, and there's the barrel of the cannon. But then we've got right here 1, 2, 3 more examples of one big object. The case of this, though, is that we see the turret turning on the submarine and bringing its in a line of sight directly towards the viewer, and then pow, it gets us. So, exciting and interesting stuff, that. So a reverse silhouette, let's look for that. A reverse silhouette is where you've got your character in the foreground, but the space around them is blacked out, so that the intention is for you to really be looking at that character in the foreground. Now, there's a bit of this in here, but this is just because of just the way that this Ben Day is aged. It's far darker than it was when it was first put together, just because over time these things age in unflattering ways. But you can tell by the white that's put down around the borders that he's distinctly trying to tone that out. But here's a character that sticks out forward. But really, silhouette, the reverse silhouette, it really specifically focuses on the person in the panel, and it simplifies the background so that you're not intended to really think as much about that as you are about what's going on in that character. So I'll see if I can find one in here. So like I said, I'll be sketching little versions of this out on paper, and because I'm not going to take credit and claim that I'm responsible in any way for what this is. This is a wonderful thing that Larry Hama collected all of these examples into one place and then utilized those to affect an industry from what one artist was doing to simplify his creative process, has enabled the rest of us to be able to benefit from that in our storytelling approaches. See, this is why, I appreciate How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way and things like that. That's grand. But sometimes it's less that, and it's more the simple, less about that whole, here's the basics, 1, 2, 3, and sometimes where you see somebody just, here's examples of what works. And this is how he presents things to you, so that really it's you having to make the effort and do the little bit of work in order to check that out, to sort of figure out, oh, I see what they're talking about here. I see what they mean by all of that. Here's another good example of how contrast can be used really interesting, in a really interesting way. Here's Bob with his back, looking through a crack through the front door, and there's his lady friend who he thinks is outside from hearing something on the radio. And so, Bob, wait! And there's the whole feeling of click, and he closes the door on her. And because our next shot is her on the outside. Let me in, I don't understand. Don't know? I know what you are, Kathy. It's just ridiculous. But, yeah, it's sort of, let me see, this would be, characters going off into the darkness, I guess, but all of the light is intended on this character here, and everything else is blackened out or washed out, right? And you've got an interesting 3-stage in the middle of this page. There's the one tonal value for the guy in the foreground. Here's a secondary plane that's established by the light, these illuminated guys in the midground, and then technically it's a third plane by this black shadow creeping across that horizon. And it leaves room up here, lack of information, so there's room for the text and for the sound effects, right? But these little examples of, here's, the intention of the focus here is on our guy. It's just on our guy. It's just on our guy. It's just on the gun, the lone gun in the field, and our guy and going into the darkness in the back. I love things like that. I really do. I really do. Okay, so we've got... Oh, extreme close-up. Extreme close-up! So, lots of them. Tons and tons of... There's Wally Wood himself, folks. My name is Wood. My name is Mud. So here's there's lots of examples of extreme close-ups on characters. Like here's one where we see our guy lying in his bed. So this is Mars. Yeah, just great. And this is talking about him and his brother before he moved away and became his astronaut. So here's another extreme close-up on this character as he's dreaming and thinking about what happened to the Martians, and then we get back into that early example of the big head, the emotional head. But the extreme close-up is literally where you're zooming. It's not a head. It's a face shot. It's zoomed in so tight that, you know, you're just drawn. The idea is to draw you right inside the head of the character in the panel. It's past looking at them as, you know, objective character, and becomes more about your immersion in that character, those thoughts. Let's see if we can find one more here, because he puts them to use, and he puts them to use really well. Lots and lots and lots and lots of pictures. Maybe not so much in this one. It's funny, I say that, and then I go to the back, and I'll find one quickly. So in the meantime, while you're waiting for me to find one, why did the vision impaired miner fall in that well? It's a serious question. Because he couldn't see that well. I mean, this is, I guess, close to one here. But this is more of a big head, I would think. The emotional feeling of the character within the context, right? That's a big head. I guess this might be one. This might be the extreme close-up. As he's, you know, oh, good Lord, blood. Right there, sorry. Right? So we're meant to be right there in that emotional moment with them. We're supposed to be understanding our character's perspective as he realizes, that's not good. So that, I guess that would follow. It's just not, it's still large head shape, but again, there's no absolute rules. It's just, we want to have an idea of different tools to utilize in our storytelling technique. And so Wood's list of 22/24 panels that always work is pretty good at rounding those out for us. Let's see where we're at. It's Wally Wood again. Hey kids, don't smoke. Side light or top, lots and lots of panels of that. We'll show that in a second. Full figure open panel. Profile, no background, right? No big G. So let's do profile, no background, and side light or top. Let's look for those. So, well, there's your side light. There's your top light. These are pretty direct, pretty much right away. There's wonderful contrasting values in the images in the panels, right? There's your side light right there. And so what it means by side light is the source of the illumination, right? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from the side? Is it coming from above? And how does that illumination source project onto the face? So I'm wearing a ball cap, okay? So if you want to take a look at this as a panel, then there's a few different ways you can do this. So you see where Wally Wood has really filled in solid blacks into the areas that are shadowed. And we know they're shadowed to some extent. You know, we know how cast light works, things like that. I think I talked about that earlier. And here, I'll show you now. What I mean by cast light is this. Okay, so if you've got a ball and you've got your light source coming at said ball, and it'll cast this shadow on that back side of the ball. Now, there's going to be a shadow cast by the ball onto the ground, but there's going to be interesting things that happen, and that's there's a slight little rim of light that's actually reflected off the surface area that the ball sits on. And as that continues down into this lower area where the ball is, you know, touching the shadow, it's not just a solid black right up to the edge thing. If you look really closely, there's this little thin line of reflection. It hits down there as well. And there's how it works in color. So he pushes that even farther and just blacks out this entire side of the face. There's no light source whatsoever and nothing to reflect light off of on this side. Whereas this guy, the second character, he does. I mean, that light can be bouncing off of his buddy's outfit. Let's say he's wearing a nice silver shirt. I don't know. But, so you see that the solid side light or top light source is distinctly applied. Now, if you were to do that, back to my face. If you're to do that, looking at what's going on here, then this area in my eyes, you would black right out. And, you know, sharp little angular shadows right in here. Big cut of shadow right underneath my chin. You know, and to really put a lot of contrast in this frame, in this image. You know, high contrast makes the face even more scary, right? Even more intense, even more focused. Yeah, so let's check out side light or top light some more. I mean, there's another good example of contrast. Here, okay, so this is the three stage, okay? Everybody in the foreground, all in white, like all lit up, all clearly under the direct light source. The entire mid-ground is toned out or silhouetted right here. These guys are just black shadows, and this is all deep shadowed. Okay, but then we see a shot over their shoulders, behind their heads, of the environment, the background. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this just becomes a nice way to separate these guys from the ground, but continuing this value throughout. But we still understand it. Here they are. Here's everybody standing here. Here's the place behind them, and then there's the space behind them. Three stage again. Character here in the foreground, really silhouetted out as this guy's got this projected shadow from behind his back. Here all the illumination is coming off of this fire in the middle of him. That's why it's lots of dark shadow over here, even though you're getting a reflection of light on top of these objects to make them stand out. Here's our illuminated mid-ground that just sort of carries this plane on to here, but then we shadow out our secondary plane right here, this gray tone, and the black shadows in behind. You know, heavy black at the front, heavy black at the back, but this is all one shape right here. This is the second shape. That's the third shape, or plane. So what was it? Oh yeah, side light, top light. Well, there's foreground silhouette, right? Talked about that earlier. There's your foreground silhouetted character, and then there's your person who's your intention is not as much to be about this guy because he's dark and foreboding, but it is about how our character is reacting to this guy. So here's a good example right here of character. This is what we were looking for earlier. It's a reverse silhouette. So here's our characters in the foreground and the black environment behind them. Now this also incorporates cast shadow as well, but The focus is on these two and their connection, and nothing around them really matters. All right, all right. So let's see. Side light, top light. Red light, green light. It's not the same thing, Chris. I'm skipping through some of these really grayed out panels, or pages, I'm sorry, because it's less clearly defined for some people. So, side light, top light. There you go. There's a big side light right there. Look at that wonderful thing he does, though, with the shadow here, and he still gives you a good percentage of that frame of the glasses, and brings it home by defining the glass frame on the opposite side, the other eye. But that's a good side illumination here, and it just silhouettes out half of his head. Again, there's the big silhouette, big cast shadow there. Side light, top light. I just like saying it now. Okay, so when we go back to back ahead, part ahead, there's a back ahead, part ahead, back ahead, part ahead. Right? Here's these two people talking to one another. And then this is what I was talking about earlier, where like theater, he opens it up so that the shoulders are facing towards one another. Means that these characters are in communication with one another. If the shoulders were turned so that the larger shoulder was over here on this side and the larger shoulder for that character was over on that side, or parallel to him, okay, it would show that there's a differing of opinion. That's a staging thing in theater. Is that somebody says, you know, Martha, I've got something to tell you, and Martha's facing him and she goes, oh, John, I don't want to know. That's the show. That's the show, the disconnect of the characters. You know, where she turns her back and does. So if you ever wonder why that happens in soap operas, where he's like, I've got some information, and she's like, I can't hear it right now. Or the guy behind him is like, maybe I don't want to know. You know, yeah. So, okay, so what have we got? Full figure, open panel. I mean, we had one of those with the silhouette couple there. But there's a fair amount of these. There's a reverse silhouette, by the way. Clear usage of a reverse silhouette throughout here. But they're actually projections on the wall. Anyways, so what was I doing? Oh, full figure open panel. So many things. So the couple hugging. Oh, Bob. Oh, Martha. That was a full figure open panel, but it was a couple. There's an open panel with full figures inside. Lots of engagement, lots of action. Draws you in, right? You're focusing on what's happening here. Well, it's not single person walking forward towards a frame, like is exampled here. It is an open panel where you see the full action of the characters inside. So, you know, it's all different ways of interpreting it. Now, I'm going to grab another artist that I really enjoy. There's a full figures open panel. I'm going to grab another book in a second. We're almost through. Look at all that. All kinds of figures. Open panel. So I'm going to grab another artist here. It's somebody who I really enjoy. Full figure open panel. Right there. You did not cast shadow on it, too. Full figure open panel. Lots of these things. Lots and lots and lots and lots. And we've done profile. No background. Let's see. He tends to be really good at the backgrounds, but you know, he calls these as lazy layouts, and yet at the same time, I never find them to be that lazy. I always find them to be really, really engaged in the storytelling and how the characters work within the environment. Yeah, profile, no background's a tricky one. There's one. Oh no, it's even that's got a little space building in the background. Oh, you know, here we're trying again. He gets close, but he doesn't really have no background in a lot of these examples, because here's the mother and the son, right? Oh, look, Mommy, look, a falling star. Quickly, Jimmy. Make a wish. And he's like, I wish Daddy would come home tonight. Meanwhile, that falling star's Daddy. It's terrible. Terrible. That's dark. So dark. Yeah, full figure, no background. I think, or the profile, no background is tricky. I mean, this is characters with no background, but you totally understand the fact that they're fighting mano a mano in the context of this situation. He's established it. That's the establishing shot. That frames it for you. So the rest of this, where they're just going hootenanny here, you understand where they are in what they're doing. You know, so it's utilizing 2 instances on a page informs you for the rest of the page of where they are in relationship to one another. I mean, there's 2 characters, no backgrounds. Right there. There's the 2 guys on horse having a go at each other. I mean, that would work. But they're not, they are profiles. It's just not direct up close in camera shot. Everything has a little bit of a background. You got a little bit of the lug nuts and stuff like that around the port on this ship here. We done rammed our order big as a barn door. Look at that. Huh? Look at that writing. So, White Benday, the dark foreground, we've talked about this. The all black, where the whole panels, there's a lot of this, right? The dark foreground stuff, we've looked at numerous examples of that. There's that one right there. I for a drink of water, but you're not thirsty. Read these things out of context. They're even better. No, not necessarily. But there's it's not necessarily in all black. It's just there's an awful lot of it in the panel. You know, the whole idea is to draw your focus and attention to what's going on in his face and in his head. This is sort of similar to an extreme close-up, right? But this is a direct extreme close-up. It's almost like he's building us up to get in there. Yeah, profiles with no backgrounds are tricky. See, even this has got the hull of the ship, the radio in behind, even though it's supposed to be these 2 characters. And then I guess this is goodbye, Jeff. I have no choice, Myrna. I could go myself if I could, but that wouldn't do any good. No one would survive then. Usif. I know, U.S. Air Force. I know. Small Fig Benday. We've seen a few of those as well, where it's just a little... The whole idea of small figure Benday. Now, the Benday is just about the gradation, the value field in the background. But the whole point of having a panel where it's just somebody very small is it's very purposeful as a panel. The whole idea is for you to see this person as reduced and very small and feeling inconsequential, or that there's nothing they can do. That's the prime way to utilize that. Like, look, either we'll be killed in the attempt, or we're going to be the first human beings to see the inside of one of these things. Phil, what if nobody's around? Suppose we could capture it. So, this is an exact way for you to see the scale of things in relationship to the characters. So here they are, very small, you know, and in behind them is everything's overwhelmed them. So there's lots of instances there. You'll see that being utilized by Mr. Wood. Some of these old EC stories have like the craziest twists on them, you know. I see one more. Little tiny guys. Big world. We're so tiny. Well, I mean, that's another one on the same page, but... Yeah, well, this sort of one. Here's the little farmer guy. Well, glory be! There's a big spaceship overhead. Here's these 2 small guys looking up. Big spaceship overhead. I mean, there are examples where it tries to put, like, here's a look at, good lord! And then there's a big spaceship overhead. The whole idea of the character that's smaller in relationship to the other. Yeah. Small character can also be illustrated the vastness or size of their environment. Oh yeah, that's exactly it. Here, that's the prime example of this. Is that here's your guy right here, in scope of what's around him, right? He's so small in relationship to this great unknown, you know. When I consulted with the Air Force about what I'd seen, this is kind of interesting. He's wearing his airman's jacket and his airman's uniform. But there's a little plane in the background in case you aren't picking up on it. It's Air Force, Billy! I love Wally Wood's work. It's of a time and place. It really is. This whole approach of the text, the narrative above all the panels. Welcome aboard, by the way, Paul. You know, the whole idea of this text above the panels, isolating the art and the text from one another. It's you know, the comics got so far away from that, and we're so concerned about you know, the visual elements, and then you would just place the visual, the textual elements within it. That it went completely the opposite way by the 90s. Honest Jimmy, when I come back from this trip, I'll never go away again. Oh, Dan, take care. Clear the area. So here is the family, the last little emotional moment, saying goodbye to one another, and this imposition. You know, clear the area because Dad's going off in his rocket ship. So enough of this business. You know, Paul says, that spaceship's an XYZ750, my favorite model. Have you seen any pictures of new E50s? I hear those things are pretty good. Star Wars joke, folks. Okay, so there's Wally Wood's 24 panels, as opposed to the 22 that it says on the page. And again, it says 22 because these aren't clearly as defined as everything else. It's just kind of funny that we always call the 22, but it's really 24. So yeah, so you know, this is in the book. This is going up on the Patreon, and so if you're interested in this, these opportunities for you to look at, how to incorporate those in your work, then this is a good way to go about doing it. Now, let's go. Modern artist. You're into Star Wars? So, this... here we go. This is Stuart Immonen drawing Star Wars. Now, what we specifically just talked about, small figure Bende. So, look at the scope of this scene. Look at the insanity of this business here. Okay? And all of the spaceships, just to give you a really straightforward understanding of the scale of things. So now when you see this guy jumping off of this top of this small little building area, or them running along the tops of here with the doodaddery sticking out, like you see many examples throughout here. Okay, so when you see these things now, and you see this character, this tiny character leaping across this big chasm of space, it helps you to understand the scale of things, right? And gives you a sense of dimensionality to it. So, you know, but it gives you a sense of, what Paul was talking about a second ago is about the vastness of the environment and how the character relates to it. They're fairly overwhelmed. So, here's another good example of, here's a character in the foreground, it's very small in relationship to the threatening dread of this big Pizza the Hut. So, yeah, you know, or here's an action where a character is fallen, you know, through the, this is a cliche, right, where they fall through the laundry lines and the vinyl awning and land in the garbage. It's just done in Star Wars world. And then, because there he is getting up in the garbage, right, with the two guys is where they've landed. And also that this kid can get back his laser stick. So, And this is isn't that fortunate that his robot pulls up to him where he landed, even though his robot was way back where they started, so. All right, so there's lots of examples of different some of these Wally Wood applications. Here's your characters in the foreground, right, with the back completely washed right out. None of this matters. What matters is, spaghetti-o in the foreground. So that emotional intensity is right there. Now here it says the bottom's open. Bottom's not open right here, but you do get the sense of the foreground just moves off towards us. And so that's a great example of that. Let's see, here's your back of the head, front of the head. There's your head shot, right? There's your big head character thinking. It zones us right in on what's going on within their noggin. All kinds of different examples. There's small characters, big environment, right? There they are there. All this hocus pocus tomfoolery around them. So here's even though that this panel, so this is a modern conventional break from the old 22. It talks about in Wally Wood, where you've got your full figure, the open panel, right? That's what this is. The difference is there's no framing element to just isolate them here within a panel or not. There's just no border at all. It goes all the way to the outside of the frame of reference. So it works in the same way of a full figure open panel. Even though a lot of modern comics utilize the entirety of the page. Right? So it's an interesting convention. This is the daytime background and the silhouette foreground. So here we are, these two people that are looking over down at the people that are meeting in the center and talking about, oh, this is a bad deal. Oh, we're going to go get somebody to get them out of there. So there's our lit up little area in the foreground, but this works as the same as this panel, where it's the idea is the focus is on what's happening in the scope, as opposed to and washing out what's in our foreground. This isn't as we just know somebody's watching as these people are chatting. So yeah, so all of these different examples that you're seeing, this has got your cast shadow, right? Down, or that's not a down shot though. But he utilizes all of these tools, all these devices. This is Stuart Eminem that we're looking at now. He utilizes all of these devices, but in more complex framing mechanisms, a more complex overlapping of panels, and an interaction of one element on the page or one frame of reference to the next one. Like this one's bleeding over into that one. Right? We've got our characters silhouetted here, and the area beyond there is what our focus is to be drawn to. He's captured by these guys. They're darkened out, gives a sense of foreboding, but it also gives us an idea that they're walking out of a tunnel out into this large and illuminated space. And then we go right down here. There's your big head. Right? Here's your big head. Nothing worried about back here. It's just an interesting design pattern to put on the page. But we want you to look at this guy going, I won't fight for the enjoyment of some hot. It's my Luke impression. You're welcome. There we go. There's your character. No border, right? Open panel. Now it says, the idea that's full figure. Well, you get a sense of I'm so sorry. Put it all in camera. You get a sense of the full figure of the character. You know that by the shift in that hip, and that this one leg is moving forward, how he's standing. Your brain can kind of fill in what the rest of his body's doing. And then you see in the next panel where he's got his one leg move forward and his legs back. It sort of continues that action on. So there's all kinds of little mechanisms like that are thrown in here. There's a shot where, there we go. Look at this. So here's this bad guy who's being, hey, tell us what we want to know, you know. And so he's deposited onto this garbage barge. So there he is. He's illuminated. The rest of the particulars on the garbage barge are really shadowed out with black line art or black shapes, and or the coloring choices to distinctly separate him, so that you notice and understand that that's where he landed, as opposed to all the other information that's around you. We want your eye to be drawn to that. Okay, and this object has got no panel around it. There's your open panel, complete object. There's the car, there's the plane. But he's taken it a little step further by putting, although it's separated from the barge, he's put the context of the background in there. But it still works as an open panel, complete object car plane, right? So yeah, there's your characters in profile talking to one another. You, right? So there's lots of different mechanisms that are worked in place. There's a 3-stage right there. That 3-stage is, here's this environment at the foreground with the color change, darker values. Okay, here's these characters at darker values, pull them forward out. Slightly washed out colors in behind. Okay, a little more blending of the values into one another than the distinct differences of color here. And then this one has the same as this, just to raise it from this background area. So then here's our background area, in here, and there's that 3rd stage. That value shift again, and, you know, just tonal shapes for the buildings in the background. 3-stage. Let's see, is there any more? I'm just sort of picking things out as we come across them. But these interesting panel arrangements that are here now is to, like, this is meant to show emotional intensity. So we've got our characters that, you know, this is our, let me see, what's it called? See, you could call it the what is it? The profile with no background, but it's not a profile. It's the characters standing here directly and distinctly in front of us. And it gives us that emotional sense of he's withdrawn, he's pulling back. That's with the body language. He's standing here. But the background really doesn't matter. We just want the focus on the character. So it's like a reverse silhouette, right? Where they're standing here and the background is just valued out. Is it solid black? No. But does it work the same way? Yes. So all these different methods that are utilized in order to tell the stories, this person is using them to full effect. But he's taken that in his own creative sensibility and the really interesting design sense about breaking the conventions of layout from the way that people used to do it, like in the 1950s with Wally Wood's EC work that we looked at. And he's got so much more dramatic impact of his panels. Like you hear, like here he is, hello Chewbacca, and Chewbacca sends his regards, and Chewbacca's, ooh, you know, getting electrocuted. Now we move our eye here, and then we follow down, and then we go back down to the electric shock thing. But the whole point is, the entire time that we're reading this, because he's so prominent, because of this overlap of the panels, we know the entire conversation here, Chewbacca's going and getting electrocuted until the robot picks up the thing that electrocutes Chewbacca and he takes the charge instead. And we follow that course of action. Well, you know, Chewbacca did save my life. I suppose I probably should. Why do I always have to be the hero? And he goes, hey, don't. Done. So we move over to our next panel, and it carries over. He's shocked now. He falls back. We get the sense that he's fallen onto his back here. Slight little impact shapes there from being electrocuted, right? Crazy droid. There's his response to the action. And then, well, come on then, big guy. A lot more where that came from. And he's, I'm having none of it. I'm having none of it. Let's have a golden meat. You know, that's what Chewbacca says. And so wonderful moment here where you're like, oh yeah, and then we go back to the other scene. That's a great way to leave you hanging, so you want to come back and say, did he hit that guy? Did he punch him in the nose? So here's our character in the foreground. There's our little character silhouetted. This framing motif here with the black bands on the side that are being broken by the light of this washout in behind, this reverse silhouette happening. You know, there's your reverse silhouette there. They're the same thing, and just very different utilizations. And then we get into small character, big world, right? So small fig, and it gives you a sense, by the way, of environment, even though it's not just this regular value shift of just black down to white. By blacking out the circular aspect of the arena and just having him standing on the sandy surface, which does have a gradation in it, it gives you that same sense, right? But look at the sense of impact that he draws it as. Oh yeah, let's get at it, right? So then when we jump back to that scene, this is almost like the continuation of that action. There he goes, pulling the fist back to give him an old a vapor on the japper. And, you know, ow! And so here these two are throwing down. And just the emotional aspect of the frustration on their faces and things like that. But this sweep this way, and then this character moves that. And then this character is arching again in this direction. So it continues to do this language here of their fight scene, and ends with the reversal of it to bring this to a termination point. I love stuff like that, folks. Oh, look at that. That's fantastic. How all the mechanisms around, all the framing mechanisms around this are all focused on the key ingredient in the secret sauce, and that is, yeah, busted. This guy's in trouble now. So, and then then fortune turns again. This is a contemporary artist, Stuart Immonen, Immonen, who is utilizing Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work really, really effectively. All right, well, I'm gonna scribble out some examples of ways that I would look at. So this is how I'm going to do it for the 22 panels that I'm putting in to this book of the ways that I do things. So I'm going to put the 22 panels in here of how I might utilize these 22 panels, how I might interpret them now, and I'll show those tomorrow. Okay, but I just wanted to not just talk to you about this. I wanted to showcase examples of how Wally Wood would go about doing those. And then to show you a very, very competent, very, very, very fantastic contemporary illustrator, Stuart Immonen, and how he utilizes those in a very different way. So that's today. Let's before I go, I'm going to pull the thing out of the book, and I'll say thank you everybody for coming and hanging out. Creator examines the folly of his creation. I feel like I've done that. And that's why we don't invite Tony Danza to our barbecues. Can you see that? No, he can't because it's in green. And that's why we don't invite Tony Danza to our barbecues. That'll be the page that I do for tomorrow. And that suggestion comes from Jim L. Okay, so there you go, folks. I hope this was of interest to you. I hope that this helped out in trying to get a grasp, maybe a firmer grasp on Wally Wood's 22 panels, 22-ish panels, and the fact that they do always work in helping an artist have an understanding of how to keep continuing an interesting narrative through the storytelling that they're trying to do. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. So long, Paul, Jim, Susanna, Josh, and anybody else that's come and joined in with us today. Yeah, I hope you guys find this interesting, and I'll post tomorrow's one-page story of, and that's why we don't invite Tony Danza to our barbecues tomorrow. All right, and yeah, I'll see you later on. I'll be back streaming tomorrow afternoon. Bye for now.